But now to the CSIRO and its report into energy costs, which has hit coalition plans for a nuclear future.
The CSIRO has completely torpedoed this uncosted nuclear fantasy of Peter Dutton's.
The CSIRO is Australia's premier science body, and it has bad news for those who argue that nuclear energy is the key to reaching net zero.
Nuclear option unviable.
Nuclear could cost up to $17 billion and take until 2040 to build.
CSIRO report paints grim picture of cost, timeline of coalition's nuclear idea.
The CSIRO has said before that nuclear energy in Australia can't compete with renewables and would come too late to save us from global warming. But it's now teamed up with the Australian energy market operator to put numbers on its assessment, saying we wouldn't see the first reactor until 2040. With Seven's Mark Riley reporting.
A comprehensive CSIRO study finds powering Australia through the Coalition's nuclear energy plan would cost twice as much as renewables. And take 15 years to build, extending coal and gas-fired generation.
So, how is this reported at The Australian, which has long campaigned for nuclear energy and lower power prices? Well, it certainly wasn't front-page news, where the paper was warning about the risk of green energy and blackouts. But tucked away on page 5 was this enticing headline.
CSIRO runs ruler over value of large-scale nuclear power.
Wow, talk about clickbait. And online, the story was even harder to locate, although we did find the CEO of Woodside slamming Labor's energy policy as wishful thinking. But this subtle downplaying by the Oz was nothing compared to the approach at Sky After Dark, where commentators lined up to sink the slipper into the scientists at CSIRO and claim that its negation of nuclear should just be ignored, with Chris Kenny landing the first blow.
Is this science or is this advocacy? Is this science or is this ideology?
Kenny accusing the nation's science and energy experts of fiddling the figures to suit the renewable message.
So the CSIRO, they just juggle around with some of their numbers and they chuck in a bit of transmission here and a bit of firming there and some batteries there, and they pretend they've invented a new form of energy, reliable renewables.
Yes, these government scientists can't be trusted. And on Sherry Markson's show, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger was telling us why.
The CSIRO haven't got the credibility that they had 20 or 30 years ago because they've been very much part of the sort of, screaming cultural left on these environmental issues over more than a decade now.
And that message was echoed by Peter Credlin, also on Sky, who declared,
I know where I want to go. I want to go nuclear.
And beaming into Credlin's programme from Stockholm, her fellow traveller Nick Cater agreed.
We know the technology is there, we know it works. Sweden, right, 40% nuclear. I just think it's a no-brainer.
Nick Cater is a massive fan of nuclear power and an even bigger fan of Sweden and Finland's nuclear reactors. And having travelled there at his own expense, he's been enthusing about it all to The Australian and to Sky News in several other crosses to Credlin from the country, as well as appearing on the libertarian digital channel ADH TV.
We're in a clean energy paradise here in Finland. The electricity grid is running at 90 to 95% carbon free. They've got the second cheapest electricity in Europe, all thanks to nuclear.
But it's not all thanks to nuclear, which actually generates only a third of Finland's electricity. And it's not recent decisions that have made Finland's power cheap. Finland opted for nuclear energy 60 years ago, and building it today is an entirely different proposition. This brand new nuclear reactor at Olkiluoto Island, for example, where Cater says,
I would quite happily settle for a holiday cottage right here. I tell you what, right here. And the good thing is the lights wouldn't go out.
That was due to open way back in 2009 and cost €3 billion. But it ended up costing nearly 4 times as much, and it arrived 14 years late, with even The Australian in 2015 calling it a cautionary tale. Technical problems have also kept it shut down for 73 days since it opened. And that's in a country which has experience in nuclear power, existing sites and wide popular support, unlike Australia. But let's go back to Sky, where Andrew Bolt was also spruiking the nuclear cause, inviting on 17-year-old Will Shackle and asking,
Look, the CSIRO saying nuclear power is much more expensive than wind and solar, will take 15 years to save us, too late. Do you believe it? What do you know at 17 that the CSIRO does not know at all?
Good question. which in fact was met with some good answers from the teenage founder of Nuclear for Australia, including a call to lift the ban on nuclear energy in this country and have a proper debate. But even Shackle couldn't answer the problem that nuclear power would not deliver low-emissions electricity in Australia until 2040 or later, while climate change action is needed now. However, let's not pretend that the Coalition's energy policy is the only one to get a free pass from sections of the media. Labor's reliance on carbon capture and storage to hit net zero by 2050 is even more pie in the sky, because as Crikey's Bernard Keane observed last week,
Unlike Dutton's nuclear power technology, carbon capture doesn't work.
with Keane citing a number of recent failures and a long list of abandoned projects. The CSIRO and AEMO report finds that carbon capture would cost almost as much as large-scale nuclear, whether it's trying to clean up coal or gas. And trying is still the operative word. Surely the media should also have highlighted that fantasy as well.
We begin tonight with sheer terror, 37,000 feet up. Passengers have described the horror on board as severe turbulence hit a flight en route from London to Singapore.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And apart from sharks, nothing excites news bosses more than terror in the skies, with the Singapore Airlines Boeing 777 forced to make an emergency landing in Bangkok after hitting severe turbulence over Myanmar. The ABC devoting 6 minutes to the drama at the top of its 7 p.m. bulletin, and the commercial media also going big.
A walk through the plane shows the cabin strewn with debris, oxygen masks dangling, and so too the ceiling of one of the aircraft's galleys. Wine bottles litter this floor, another is covered in boxes and packaging, and there are bloodstains.
One man in his 70s died of a suspected heart attack, and more than 100 people were injured, with TV reporters swarming the airport as passengers returned home after the terrifying ordeal. While Sunrise teed up CNN's Richard Quest for some dramatic show and tell.
Over Myanmar, there is this storm sequence, and for whatever reason, either pilots ahead or air traffic control, no one really tells them about it, and they start to do this.
Quest is an enthusiastic aviator, to say the least. And chatting to Natalie Barr on Wednesday morning, he was in full flight.
Imagine this is one of the people, but the plane's flying along and suddenly it drops. The roof is here and they hit. Right. And that's what happens.
Poor Natalie Barr looking bemused by Quest's antics.
So we see this plane suddenly going up by 900 feet a minute and dropping by 1,100 feet a minute. Up by 500 a minute, down by 200 a minute.
Quest was also flying his plane on his own network, CNN, and on the Piers Morgan show. Meantime, commercial bulletins in Australia went one better, rolling out the full Hollywood experience to illustrate the mid-flight scare, with Nine's Eddie Meyer dodging zooming jets, while Seven's Chris Reason and his graphics team were launching a Boeing 777 into, and then out of, the news studio. Wow. Can't wait to see what they'll do with the next great white shark attack. Maybe it could eat the presenter. But, staying on planes for now, let's go to the fuss about Airbus Albo and his cash splash on luxury jets, paid for by you, the taxpayer, and kicked off by this exclusive in The Australian on Monday.
$450 million bill to keep PM flying in style.
With the paper's foreign affairs and defence writer trawling through the budget papers to reveal
taxpayers will pay $450 million for 2 new Boeing 737 business jets to ferry around Anthony Albanese, the Governor-General and key government ministers after plans to lease the aircraft were axed.
Yes, pampered Polly's spending taxpayers' money to swan about the skies, as we all struggle with the cost of living. And 2GB's Ben Fordham just loved the story, tweeting it to his followers and parroting the paper to give Airbus Albo a whack.
According to the Australian newspaper, the new jets will have sleeping quarters and meeting facilities, and they're fitted with business class seats for all 19 VIP passengers. And no expense is being spared.
And, of course, he added,
it's a lot of money to be spending on private jets at a time like this.
And on Sky News, Paul Murray was running the same line, this time with his very own Airbus Albo graphic.
We're dealing with the cost of living by giving you a fistful of nothing, whereas they get not 1 but 2 private jets.
But did Labor even order these new RAAF jets? Well, no, because that was done by Scott Morrison's government, a year after his jet broke down in 2020 with embarrassing consequences.
A crucial National Cabinet meeting has been cancelled after a technical glitch with the PM's plane left him grounded in Cairns. Nine's Adam Hegarty is at Cairns Airport. And Adam, this aircraft breakdown having a huge impact.
But that fact was completely forgotten, or conveniently ignored, in all the Airbus Albo outrage. Meanwhile, on ABC Radio, the PM was fielding a bizarre question about the new planes from Brisbane Morning's host Steve Austin, who asked,
will they be used to fly stranded citizens out of New Caledonia at all?
Sorry?
Apparently you've purchased 2 new Boeing jets for the Australian government. Are they being used, or will they be used to fly stranded citizens out of New Caledonia?
Answer, no, because for one, they don't have them yet, and two, because even if they did, there were plenty of other aircraft ready to go, with Austin admitting he hadn't actually read the story.
Steve, I'm not sure what...
Sorry, I understood from my producers that the government was expecting 2 new Boeing jets.
Uh-oh, blame the producers. But Austin wasn't alone in clocking the headline and skipping the details, because as the Australian noted, but almost no one else did, buying the planes had actually reduced the bill for taxpayers, because the cost of leasing them had blown out.
Due to foreign exchange movements, and was due to hit $550 million, prompting a decision to buy the jets outright.
A point that Joe Hildebrand, who did read the article, was trying in vain to make on Sky.
It was actually cheaper to buy these 2 jets. The government actually saved $100 million and actually got the jets.
Luxury jets. Luxury jets.
So, what does the peanut gallery want our politicians to do? Rely on Qantas to get them there on time and have meetings up the front of the plane? Maybe the folks at Sky should ask how Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch get around. Spoiler, they have big private jets. And finally, to London, and a man in need of a towel.
Drown
and out.
Rain-soaked Sunak sets the general election date.
British PM Rishi Sunak stunned Britain last week when he strode out of number 10 and announced an early election. But no sooner had he begun the fight of his life than the heavens opened up.
Economic stability is the bedrock of any future
It's getting
success.
quite wet.
Yes. Whether that is rising wages and good...
Yes, no brolly, leaving soggy Sunak to carry on for 8 minutes in the pouring rain. And didn't the headline writers have a blast?
Drowning Street.
Sunak takes the plunge.
The deluge. On your marks.
Get wet.
Go!
As the political cliche goes, it's all about the optics. And commentators all agreed the optics were bad.
It was completely ludicrous, completely ludicrous. I know you talk about seizing the moment. I wish he'd seized an umbrella.
It looked like he was being washed away, soggy, Sunak, soaked Sunak.
That image will last forever.
And a man standing looking absolutely drenched and beaten up is not somebody that is going to inspire confidence, really, is it?
Answer, no, with Piers Morgan asking the obvious question. But it wasn't just the rain that dampened Rishi Sunak's big moment. He also struggled to be heard over music being blasted down the street by a noisy heckler.
We prioritised energy security and your family finances over environmental dogma in our approach to net zero.
And what was the song doing battle with Sunak? Labour's 1997 landslide theme, Things Can Only Get Better. And the heckler, anti-Brexit protester Steve Bray, who, as you can see, had what Sunak desperately needed, an umbrella, leaving the UK's Daily Telly to quip on its front page,
Things can only get wetter.
And the bad optics continued a few hours later when Sky UK was shoved out of Sunak's first campaign event on live TV.
This is where the Prime Minister is going to speak in the next few minutes, and I'm being forcibly removed. We just simply wanted to have access tonight at Sky News.
But reporter Darren McCaffrey, taking his cue from the PM, no doubt, carried on regardless.
This is a decision, a gamble that he's taken, so we're going to be put into an elevator here. Our bags are up here. We're probably going to have to leave at this stage.
After 14 years in power, the task of the Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak is monumental, if not impossible, with the Tories 20 points behind Labour in the polls and publicly bleeding for months, which makes the decision to send the Prime Minister into the rain to announce the election ripe for ridicule, which is what broadcaster Andrew Neil was doing when he told Spectator TV,
They really couldn't organise the proverbial piss-up in a brewery. They really couldn't.
And that's all from us for tonight. You can read a statement from Nick Cater on our website. And don't forget, Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, until next week, goodbye.